Hey cuties, I'm Myles Sexton, a content creator, activist, and loud and proud disruptor of the norm. On our private bits, we talk about the things and people that don't get talked about enough, or at all. Trust me, as a sober, HIV positive, non-binary person, I would know. Join me as I chat with people in my life and from around the world whose stories deserve to be heard. Maybe you'll learn something new and you will definitely LOL. Our Private Bits is also part of the ACAST Curator Network. All right, cuties, today on Our Private Bits, we are changing things up a little bit because I'm going to be answering questions that you all asked me on social media. And in order to do that, I have a very special guest, Slater Manzo, who is my producer on the podcast. Welcome. Want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing there?
I know you're such a personality, so it's like nice to bring you in front of the camera.
Yes, it's kind of fun to be in front of the camera for once, I have to admit. But do I love doing the back behind the scenes kind of stuff? Absolutely. I love it.
Also, when we're like recording the podcast, like I have such a hard time not watching Slater's like reactions to things.
Because I'm a big reactor too. Like I will be off to the side, literally being like,
it's so good. I live for it. I live for it. You know, it's like when we're like, I guess like when they have like those like live studio audience shows and like they put up the signs of like laugh now or whatever. It's like, it makes me like laugh even more when you're
perfect. I'm the prompter then for you.
I'm into it.
Love it.
So I actually didn't really read the questions that came in because I felt like I wanted them to be a bit of a surprise for me. So I took screenshots of the questions and just sent them to you. So I actually have no idea what any of these questions are.
Oh,
so,
right.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see what they are today.
Okay. Well, I get to surprise you with the questions, which is always fun. Yeah. So I love that. Okay. So we'll start it off. We'll do the first question that is here. This is actually a good question, I think, to start off on. So, how do you figure out your own personal style and aesthetic?
Oh gosh. I feel like a lot of people ask me this and I don't know, like I'm so like the way that I dress, I think is so based off of like emotion and like how I'm feeling and like like if I'm leaning into my divine femininity or masculinity that day. So like, I don't know. I don't feel like I follow a specific like aesthetic because I it's like it's so much based off of feeling, and I think that's why I like love just wearing like such a variety of looks and outfits. Like I don't know, I don't think that like I don't know. I mean, I have to ask other people, but I don't think like I can be like, what's like a signature like Myles Sexton look? Because I feel like I don't have like that aesthetic. I don't know. What do you think? Like,
interesting.
Do you think I have an aesthetic?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I would say so.
Okay, what's your aesthetic?
No, I would say like you because you always like come across as this like beautiful creature as the best way to describe it. It's like it is one of those things where you are always like just in this embodiment of masculine and feminine, and it's a great way of like showing that off in the way that you dress and the way that you do yourself. It's like its own brand. Like I can't really. If I try and think of like someone else in a Myles Sexton outfit, it doesn't sit in my brain as correct.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I like it.
Like your Jean-Paul Gaultier moments and all those kind of things are like phenomenal. And it's like when I see you in those outfits, I'm just in there going like, yes, that makes sense. Everything clicks.
Well, I appreciate that. But I feel like, I don't know, it's like, I feel like I get so inspired, I guess, like by history a bit. Like I really like, I love referencing, I think like ancient artwork and like I don't know, just like the way that people would dress in like ancient times. So I love bringing a bit of like that inspiration into this sort of like modern era a bit too. Like I don't know, like you know, like I love like nodding to the past and then like bringing it to the future, I guess.
Okay, yes, love that. Okay, let's go on to the next question. There, this one is a fun one, but I'm curious on your thoughts on it.
Okay,
any tips of finding and navigating queer communities, scenes, and spaces?
Ooh. I mean, like, I really like this question.
Right?
You know, like, honestly, I feel like it can be really hard and intimidating, you know? Like, I definitely, like, remember being, you know, like a 16, 17, 18-year-old and, like, coming into queer spaces for the first time and just feeling very, like, overwhelmed and, like, wasn't sure, like, where I fit in. And, you know, because I was so androgynous as a teenager and a young adult, you know, like, I never really felt like I saw my place, like, within community. And, like, everyone was like, "Oh, like, you should just be a drag queen." And there was a lot of this, like, kind of conversation around that. So, you know, but I think that's, like I think, like, from the surface, it can be very, like, it can be very intimidating. But I think
Of
like once
course.
you go beyond that, you'll find your people within it. But
Yeah.
I think it's like you just have to be patient and like maybe you find those people online first or like, I really like I think take notice to like what type of spaces like you're going into
Mhm.
because like I think there's so many like of these almost like subcategories of queer spaces, right?
Yeah.
That like, depending on where you go, you might get like like you're going to like a leather bar, you're probably going to get like more bears or,
Yes.
like if you're going to like a house music kind of dance club kind of thing, like I feel like it's probably more like jocks or like things like that. Like
You'll also find
sometimes
more club kids, I find, in that
totally.
area
And you'll
too,
get
so
like a blend. And it just
mhm.
depends on like where you go, like I don't know. And also like every city I feel like is different too, like depending on
Definitely.
like who goes sort of where and like yeah, so I think it's like, try to do your research and try to find other people. And like honestly, like for me, like one of the best things I think to help me like find people was like I would go through like kind of like hashtags and stuff like online and
Oh.
was like finding other people who were using similar hashtags that I was using on my outfits or like for my aesthetic or like now let's just use it as an example like you could go under like hashtag non-binary and like
Mhm.
maybe find other people and like that are on a similar journey that you might have like a bit of like a common thread with
Okay,
so
okay. I like that. That's really
yeah.
cool. Okay, I love that way of, like, navigating queer spaces. Is just kind of like you could just kinda have to see, It's, like, depending on where you are type of thing.
And it's gonna change, right? Like,
Mhm.
because, like for me, I like, I really only had the clubs at the beginning. So
Yeah.
like, like I very much became a club kid and like that was a part of like my identity at that time. But, as I got older and I got sober, it's like those spaces didn't really like feel safe anymore for
Mhm.
me. So like, that sort of changed. Like, I find a lot more like I've been trying to create friendships like outside of the clubs,
Yeah.
that are a bit more meaningful.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah.
actually where I'm pitching it out to anyone out there.
Yes.
Please make a queer coffee shop.
Oh my God, honestly.
Seriously, because we do not have enough of those out there, and it's, like,
Agreed.
the one thing I feel like I don't always wanna go to the club, and
Totally.
especially as, like, a music producer and DJ and all that kinda stuff,
Yeah.
like, my work is generally the club.
Exactly, you need
Like
a different space.
exactly, I would rather have a different space to socialize and meet people and all that, so
Yes.
wouldn't it be great to have a coffee shop? Just putting that out there.
Yeah, or like apps that are like not focused around like sex and are
Yes.
focused around like maybe connection and like friendship because
I
it's
think Bumble is doing something like
are
that
they starting to
actually.
do that? That's
Yeah, Bumble is,
interesting.
one of the few I think that is, like, focused on, like, friends, and also I think even, like, freelance work, I think they do something in there too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's like, like, I don't know, even when I'm traveling, right? Like, it's like I wanna connect with people, but I don't necessarily, like, want it to be, like, so sex first
Exactly.
focused,
Yeah,
And so it's like, how do you, like, meet people in other countries that you're maybe traveling to that might, like, wanna show you around or, like, show you their city or I don't know.
exactly.
Yeah,
There's options out there, but yeah, it's very limited when it comes
totally.
down to it, but at least I know of Bumble for sure
Okay,
being
I
like
I didn't know that. That's
yeah.
cool.
Alright, so we're gonna go on to the next question there. Let's see. When you feel judgment come up, how do you ease those thoughts and show your self-love?
Ooh, yeah,
Big question.
that is a big one. I think that's a big one, right? I think internally, like you're constantly sort of fighting these like the shame, or judgment or however you want to call it, because I think we have so much sort of like this history that of our lives that like lead us up to this point,
Mhm,
and so like there's a lot of times where we're gonna feel triggered and something's gonna come up, and I
mhm,
I always like I don't in therapy like we talk about it a lot is like parts work. So like you have like your wise self, and then
mhm.
you have all these other like sub sort of like parts of yourself that like kind of bubble up to the surface like when depending on like what you're feeling or what's triggering it, and
Yeah, yeah.
so with shame and judgment, I definitely like, I experience these parts that are sort of coming up. But I think as for me anyway, the more work that I do, like with communicating with myself and like being able to recognize when those parts come up, I think is such a game changer
Mhm.
for me anyway, because it's like, I think when you can recognize it, it almost like humanizes it a bit more versus like when you're not recognizing what's happening and like why you're feeling the way that you're feeling and why this part of yourself is sort of like being activated, then you kind of just like keep going forward in
Yeah.
this sort of cycle. And then you're like on this sort of like loop of shame and
Mhm.
you're really like wallowing in it a lot. And like, but when you can like recognize it and be like, okay, like right now I'm feeling shame coming up. I can accept I can understand that. I want to understand why I'm feeling that. And it just like it sort of like gives you a bit more of like an answer of like, okay, like this maybe from my childhood is making me feel this way
Yes.
because my parents spoke to me in that way. And that's
Mhm.
why I'm feeling this coming up. Or, just as an example. And like when you can sort of like link that to something, I find that helps me a lot more. So like I definitely suggest like if you have the means to be able to go to therapy and do parts work, it's been super helpful. There's like a lot of really great books. I love it's by Jessica Baum, I think is how you pronounce her last name. She has like this book called Anxiously Attached, and it like
Oh,
talks about
yes.
attachment styles, which is like
Yes.
very similar about with parts work.
Mhm.
And like so I think it does really like help you just like sit with yourself in those moments when it's coming up and like kind of be like, okay, like I appreciate you for like trying to protect me because that's really what it is at the end of the day. But like you're not actually serving me in a way that's wise or healthy. So you
Yes.
can kind of put it back to the place where it should be, like within your mind, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of looking at it, and also to even add to that, I
Yeah.
think it's also a good reminder that it's like, your reaction is generally coming from, like, your inner child.
Yes,
So it's like,
totally.
if you recognize that as, like, your inner child is coming to reach out to you for, like, love and stuff like
Yes,
that, you kinda have a bit more compassion towards that reaction, towards that
absolutely.
triggers and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
because you're like trying to soothe, right? Like
Exactly.
that's what it is. It's like you're trying to soothe, and also like I think that I didn't say earlier. It's like don't also just like try to ignore it or like
Mhm.
avoid it because
Yes.
it's like that's only going to make it worse. And I think it's important that you need to sit with it. Like, I think as humans, like we just want to experience like happiness and joy, but it's like it's important to feel shame and it's important to feel sadness and anger and like all of these emotions because these are like all parts of what make us human.
Mhm.
And I think that all of these things like also offer us like so many teachings and learnings that like if we just avoid feeling them at all or like numb ourselves so we don't feel it, then
Yeah.
like, I think it's like it actually like manifests in like a very negative way inside of ourselves.
100%. Definitely. Alright, moving on to the next question there. Okay, this one is a very interesting one.
Okay.
I'm curious on your take. You don't have to answer this
It's
one if you
fine.
don't have to. My feelings to be a woman have always been and never liked being a man, but I'm 46. Is it too late?
Okay, sorry, read this again.
I know it's a bit worded in a strange way, but I'm feeling that it's about like wanting to transition
Yes.
basically. So my feelings to be a woman have always been,
Okay.
and I never liked being a man, but I'm 46. Is it too late?
Absolutely not. I think, I think a lot of the time, like we put these sort of like timelines in our lives and we think that it's like a race to get to them. And I think that we're all in like very individual journeys,
Yeah.
and I don't think I really like encourage people to not like put these sort of like, oh, I'm 46 and I can't transition now. Like I think that that's like totally not the case. I think it's just like getting yourself to a point where you feel ready, it is really important. And like there's
Mhm.
no sort of like number or age that's like associated with that.
No.
And honestly, like there are so many people that transition later in life, and that's okay, and honestly, like from a safety perspective, like it's almost sometimes can be a better situation because if you feel like you are established in your life and you have a bit more of your own security that you can provide yourself,
Mhm.
sometimes it's a lot easier than people who do transition younger who could be homeless or abused or like whatever. Like, there's a
Mhm.
lot more like volatile sort of situations. I think like when you are younger and trying to transition, if you don't have like a really strong support network,
Yeah.
um, there also is this really great book, and now I'm like forgetting the name of it. It's by the author Rowan, who wrote like One Sunny Afternoon, and totally forgetting the first book. But anyway, it's about like his wife that transitions.
Mhm.
I think they were like already married for like 20 years or something like that,
Oh,
or like
wow.
something like that, and then transitioned like within their relationship. So,
Oh,
or
wow.
like something like yeah, it was quite a while. So
Yeah.
definitely recommend checking it out.
Ooh, yes. Good recommendation there. All right, we're gonna go on to the next question. Ooh, this one's fun. I don't know if you'll be able to, like, answer it in a podcast format because I
Okay.
feel like this is probably a TikTok, if anything, or, like, one of those Instagram reels that you have to show, but it's, what is your no makeup routine?
I mean, like, I generally, I feel like I don't wear a lot of makeup. I very much loved like the 90s when it came to like makeup,
Yeah.
where it was like things were very like minimal, So like I love like a tinted moisturizer and like a little bit of a brow gel. And then like, sometimes I'll do like a bit of bronzer maybe or like a winged eyeliner,
Yeah,
or like
yeah.
I don't know. I really try to keep it like pretty simple, just and I think, like, less is more, Like, I
Yes.
think, like, because of, like, the later, like, the 2015 kind of era, like, makeup became so heavy and, like, it became about, like, how many products can I put on? And,
Yeah.
like, people are putting, like, 10 plus products on their face, and
Mhm.
I don't know, I just find that a bit, like, excessive, and I think that there's, like, so many products that you can use in, like, multiple ways to accomplish a bit more of, like, a no makeup look, so,
Yeah.
Fenty Ease Drops are, like, my favorite. It's, like, a beautiful tint, like, moisturizer, like,
Yes.
they're one of my faves. I feel like it looks like skin. Um
It's the one that's kinda shaped like a crystal, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. I
exactly.
actually have that one too
Oh my
then.
god. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love it. Like, I
For
feel like people can't clock it, which is really nice, so
That's why I ended up getting it too, because on
yes,
those days where it's like, I just want my skin just to, like, look a little bit smoother or something like that, that's
totally.
perfect to throw on my face,
Exactly,
you
it's
know?
super blurring as
Mhm.
well, so, yeah, like, I don't know, it's like, I think you just and 2, I think it also comes from, like, a place of, like, self-acceptance,
Mhm.
Like, 'cause I also, like I used to wear, like, full coverage, like, foundation, and then I would put a full coverage powder on top, and, like, like, I think a lot of that, like, also just, like, stemmed from, like, a lot of my own insecurities that
Yeah.
I was, facing internally. So, like, yes, I'm really appreciative of makeup for helping me get to a place where I can just wear a tinted moisturizer now, but, like, you know, I think it's just, like, I also like to encourage people to have those internal conversations with themselves of
Mhm.
like why am I wearing the makeup?
Yeah.
Why do I want this much coverage? Like
Yes.
and what like is emotionally connected to that? Because like trust, like I feel like I perpetually just always look tired. So like I but it's like it's something that I've had to come to accept, and like
Mhm.
same with like my breakouts or my scars on my face, like I feel like I wear them as part of like my outfit, like I think it just like
Yeah.
makes me more interesting and
Yeah.
I've just tried to embrace it a bit more.
It gives you uniqueness, like, the idea of complete perfection is
Yeah,
impossible in the first place, and so the idea of imperfections is what makes someone perfect, you know?
totally. 100%.
Yes. Alright, we'll go on to the next question there. I think let's go with that's a good one. How can you become a brand ambassador representative?
Yeah, I mean like I think that's this is a good one. Like being a content creator and like trying to work with brands, I think is something that takes time, like
Yes.
I think in terms of like followers, like it's really important that you do create some sort of like following online before brands are really going to work with you. Like
Mhm.
that's just the reality, I think of it. So,
Too real.
yes. And so, like, I think what's really great is like, maybe figure out which brands you want to work with and then like maybe start curating content like what those brands might wanna use,
Mhm.
if let's say you wanna work with some makeup brands, start posting reviews and tutorials of, like, your makeup products and start putting it out there, and then, like, I would say, like, to be honest, like, most brands probably want you to have 10,000 followers, like
As a minimum.
yeah, as
No,
a
that's a
minimum to
very much
work
the
with
case.
you, so, like, really make that a goal for yourself to sort of, like, hit,
Mhm.
and then, like, you know and then a big thing that I usually do is like I'll like Google like what the PR agencies are like in the city that I live in and then I usually like on their websites they'll have like links or emails that you
Mhm.
can email to people who like at that work at the agency and like which brands they work with, And so like I
Yeah, yeah.
usually like pitch to them and I'll be like, "Hey," like I usually introduce myself and then I'll really like already sort do my research on the brands that they represent and like the products that maybe I would want to feature and I will pitch sort of ideas that I have of like how I would love to be able to feature their products in like some sponsored content and I
Okay.
sort of go like the route that way.
Okay, nice. Nice, good answer, I like that. Um, oh, this is a good one too, because I think we started working together when this happened as well. When did you choose to be open about your status? Was it hard?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good one for both of us because like when it was with you that I reached out that I talked about my sobriety.
Yes.
But, like, I don't know, did I tell you that I was HIV positive when we filmed that sobriety video? I don't think I did.
I think because if I remember correctly, you did the sobriety video first
It was,
and
like, a
then
year before I did it.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, if you did the sobriety video, we figured out doing that, and then you approached me, like, the year later about, like, "I want to do my HIV status
Yes.
video," and so, yeah, I think it was around that time-ish that I think that's how that worked
Okay,
out.
I wasn't sure if I told you or not because
Yeah.
it was, like it was very much, like I was testing the waters with that, like, sobriety video,
Yeah.
because it was, like I don't know, like, at that time when I shared my sobriety video, like, I just feel like talking about those things were so not talked about, and, like,
It
it's
felt cliche in the moment.
totally, like, it was just, like, no one was being vulnerable online. It was so much about, like, hyper perfectionism, and, like, very curated feeds, and, like,
Mhm.
TikTok wasn't around then
No.
either, and so, like, TikTok really, like, I think changed the game in terms of, like, being open and honest. So, like,
Yes.
about, like, things like this and talking about these, like, hard topics that are, like, very traumatizing and have a lot of stigma and shame attached to them. So, like, yeah, like, so I feel like I started with the sobriety video to sort of, like, test this out, and the response was, like, incredible. And,
Mhm.
like, and then I don't know, I think it just, like, helped me find the internal courage to talk about my HIV status.
Yeah.
And then but, like, really at the end of the day, I think it was about just me reclaiming my power, Like, I think shame still was, like, manifesting itself inside of me, and I needed to, like, let go of that. And by putting it out to social media was sort of like a way of, like, me holding myself accountable that, like, this isn't something that I'm gonna let it rule my life,
Yeah.
I think. So, or let the shame of it rule my life.
Yeah, interesting. So did you find it like it was like emotionally tolling on you to actually like come out with this, or did it feel more like a release, if anything?
I mean, like, both, I guess, like, HIV was a lot different than my sobriety. Like, I felt like there's not as much, like, shame-based thing, like, internal shame-based things around sobriety, like, when
Mhm.
you talk about it. But, like, with HIV, it was so different because I think it was more, like, identity focused, and I was so afraid of being rejected,
Mhm.
because it was like I had to tell, like, everyone had to sort of know this. And I was like, and I was single at the time too, and I was like, I just felt like it was, like, gonna make me, like, less desirable to, like, men, and, like, which is, like, so fucked up. And yeah, I don't
But
know,
I get the shame. The shame will be there on that idea. Like I understand.
of
Because
course.
like even for the time that like I had an STD, it's cleared
Yes,
now, but it's like first thing I had was full on shame about it, and
totally.
then it was like, oh no, my life is ruined. But then it's like, oh okay, just get a couple
No,
of treatments and then you're fine with that.
exactly. It's
Yeah,
all this, like, made up sort of stigma that we've created inside of ourselves,
yeah.
right? And it's like so yeah, so, like, so then I was like that whole year, I was really, like, just, like, battling, this of, like, I wanna talk about it, I don't wanna talk about it, I wanna talk about it. And I just did a lot of, like, traveling and, like, hiking all by myself, and I think it just, like, allowed me to spend a lot of time, like, reflecting
Hmm.
on it. And it was kind of funny, like, this is, like, it's a bit of a funny story. But so I was
Hmm.
in Thunder Bay,
Yeah.
and I was, like, on one of my hiking trips, and I like really like tarot cards. And I
Oh,
remember, like,
same.
I pulled, like, a tarot, like, I usually, like, will pull, like, a 3 card tarot card, like, sometimes when I need a bit of clarity on, like, where I'm at.
Hmm.
And I remember, like, pulling it, and it was like I don't remember exactly. I have to go back in my, like, diary and, like, look at what the exact card was. But it was like I think it was, like, one of, like, the swords cards.
Oh,
And it was, like, talking about how, like, I guess, like, the meaning behind the card is, like, something like it was, like, these things, like, there's something in your life that's, like, holding you, like, back from, like, moving forward, and you feel like you're in limbo or something like that.
yeah, yeah.
And I just, like, remember reading that, and then I don't know, it just, like, it sort of, like, gave me a bit more, like, clarity of, like, how on pause I think my life was for 2 years when I was, like, navigating it. And I just, like, I really, like, I feel like I reverted back to a lot of, like, my old scripts, and, like, just not living my most authentic self, like,
Hmm.
how I wanted to. Like, I just felt like I needed to, like, hide from the world for
Yeah.
kind of 2 years. And yeah, so I remember, like, I did this, like, really intense hike where I climbed to the top of this mountain, and, like, it was, like yeah, it was, like, so intense. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't bring enough water, and I just, like, remember, like, getting to the top and, like, just, like, sort of, like, feeling this release, and, like, was like, "Okay," like, like, felt good about my decision, and just, like,
Hmm.
could see the good intention by, like, talking about it. And I don't know, I think I like released a lot of like my shame and internalized like stigma that I had like in that sort of moment. So yeah, like I made the video like a few weeks later.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's a good way of like like I'm happy that it was a release moment, if anything, because there's always the anxiety of something like that. Trying to like post it, it's like I'm afraid of what everyone's going to think of it. But it's good that it's like, if anything, you had the release and you were like, let's just put it out to the world now.
Totally. And, like I also, because like at the time when I was diagnosed, I was also in like a very public relationship with someone.
Mm,
And so I think a lot of that also like was me, like out of respect of him, I was afraid to talk about it,
yeah.
because I think he made me feel a lot of like shame and stigma like about it. And
Sorry
like
about that.
in the relationship. And like, he was just like, yeah, like it wasn't like I think in his way, he was trying his best to support me, and I know that the whole situation was a lot, and like, you know, I it's a bit of like it's a bit of a frustrating situation,
Hmm.
like because it's like, I did cheat on him within the relationship and like that, and it was like, but I also was dealing with a lot of like health problems. So like I don't fully know if it came from the person that I cheated on him with or I had it prior to the relationship. So there was a lot of like unknown within it. So, when we broke up and whatever, and I told him that I wanted to go like public about my status, so I shared him the script that I was like, basically gonna recite like in the video. And
Hmm.
like and it was really nice. Like he actually was like pretty supportive and like encouraging about me like talking about it. And and there wasn't any sort of like reference to it, but I did lie in that video by saying like I didn't I made the timeline different in the video, like out
Hmm.
of respect for him to not like try to associate it with him, even though like it didn't work in my favor. And people like, a lot of people were messaging him, asking him if he was like positive. And I can get that that's like can be very overwhelming, but it was just a lot to deal with,
Yeah.
like in that time, because I was like, this was like probably the most vulnerable thing I've ever done in my entire life. I'm talking about this on social media and like, and then now I'm like also managing someone else's emotions at the same time when they're not publicly telling the world that they're HIV positive, but I
Yeah.
was, so
Yeah.
yeah, it was a lot.
Let's just say thank God for Tyler.
Yeah,
Yeah, Tyler's a blessing being like,
totally. Such
just
a
like,
gem.
yeah, everything's fine. Everything's great.
Totally.
All right, let's go into the next one. This one, oh, is actually very much related to your trip actually just
Okay.
came that you just went on. How important are mindfulness and self-care? I'll say that question again.
Yes.
How important are mindfulness and self-care when at an all-inclusive resort and staying sober?
Yeah, I mean, well, this was like my first time ever going to an all-inclusive sober. So,
Yeah.
um, like I didn't really go into I don't know why, like going into the trip, I wasn't anxious or didn't even really think about that it wasn't going to be a safe space for me.
Mhm.
And then when I got there, I remember like we checked into our room and then we like went to the pool to like try to go find some food. And just like there were so many like just wasted people like throwing themselves around and like, just like, just being a mess. And
Of
like
course.
and then that's when it hit me. I was like, "Ugh, like this is not a safe space for me."
Mhm.
And so I was like, I really had to like, again, like that shame and that judgment sort of like started coming up. And like I really had to like go back to, put them away and like go back to my wise self and be like, okay, like what have I learned? What are my practices? Like what are things that ground me?
Mhm.
So I think that that's where the mindfulness sort of came in on my vacation was like, okay, like I really need to set a routine for myself that's like focused in on self-care, So, I was waking up early every day, like watching the sunrise. I'd go for like, a 5 kilometer run and then I would like work out and then I would like then go have breakfast with Tyler, and then I would
Mhm.
do some journaling and reading in the afternoon. And, I was like trying to find spaces like within the all inclusive that weren't so like party focused.
Yes.
Um, so I definitely think it's really important, but it's really like the first time that I've traveled because I'm very much more of like a backpacker sort of traveling type of person. Like I love like
Yeah, yeah.
exploring a country and not staying in one spot.
Mhm.
So, so this was really like the first time that I felt like I had to like put these things into practice. And I also like learned a lot from this trip because I'm more of like a go 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 kind of person. It really also showed me like, wow, I came home from this trip and I wasn't tired. Like I
Yeah.
felt very like re-energized and like rejuvenated and like that was a different experience. So like I think that self-care piece, I'm like, okay, how do I incorporate maybe this a bit more into like my travel of like, when we are maybe doing like our backpacking trips that we're like maybe spending a few days at the end of the trip, maybe in one spot to like relax, or
Okay.
something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, okay. And it's like I always find it fascinating because it's like I don't sit on, like, either side. Like, for me, like, I like to have drinks, but I don't
Yeah,
like to get drunk or anything like
totally.
that. But it's like, I can only imagine being in this sober position, just being around wasted people, how anxious and the energy would be around that too, you know? So, it's good that you found ways of kind of, like, coping with it. Now, it's like you're probably still gonna find more ways the more you go to, like, resorts and everything like that too, but
Yeah.
it's like it's good that it's, like, running, if anything, is one of the ways that you've found a way of expelling it, you know?
Totally. Like, yeah, I think it's important. I think it's important for people to like find things that spark joy,
Yes.
and like that's totally probably going to be different for everyone,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's like if we can find those things, I think it's nice to be able to like go back into those environments though and like reclaim I think our power
Mhm.
over those environments because
Yeah.
I think I understand the like, I avoided spaces like those for such a long time, so it was nice to go back in and be like, okay, like I feel strong enough in who I am, like I
Mhm.
can do this, and it was good. Like I did thoroughly enjoy myself like on vacation, and it
Yes.
wasn't like a super traumatic experience.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But it's like, obviously, the little triggers will come up, but then it's like you learned to deal with it.
totally.
You instead of, like, diving into the trigger, you kind of, like, worked with the trigger instead.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Alright, I do have more questions, but I think we need to call it for now and save it
Love.
for part 2, if anything. So,
Yay. Well,
yes.
thanks for your questions, and please write me on Instagram or TikTok if you have other ones that you want to learn more about.
Yeah, we'll do more of these, of course. So,
Yes.
yes. Alright. Take care.